Figures with no arms and hollow eyes carved into Utah's red rock might be gods or something else that came down from the sky. Deep in a Mexican cave, explorers claim they've found ancient stones that show aliens trading corn with humans. And in the dark tunnels of a South African cave, a species with chimp-sized brains somehow left behind the world's oldest known symbolic art. These are more ancient cave markings that show advanced technology. In Utah's Sago Canyon, there's a mysterious stretch of ancient rock art. Some of these carvings are over 8,000 years old. They don't look like your typical cave drawings of hunters or animals. Instead, they're these tall, kinda eerie figures with huge hollow eyes, no arms or legs, and in some cases, what look like antennae sticking out of their heads. They look kinda like robots from 1950s B-movies. Naturally, this has caught the attention of people who believe in the ancient astronaut theory. Basically, that maybe these ancient people had actual encounters with visitors from space. One of the standout images is called the Barrier Canyon Holy Man. And here, this towering figure is surrounded by smaller, shadowy people. Clearly, the tall figure is the important one. But were they drawing something they just imagined, or was this something they actually saw and decided to document? So here's a wild one. A group of explorers in Mexico claim that they've found actual proof of ancient contact with aliens. They were digging around in a set of caves between Veracruz and Puebla, and they pulled up what they're calling the stones of the first encounter. Basically, carved artifacts showing beings with long heads, big oval eyes, and even what looked like spaceships. One of the stones apparently shows an alien handing over what looks like a corn cob to a ruler. The group said their search has, quote, yielded totally unexpected results, and they genuinely believe they found the ultimate evidence that alien beings visited Earth thousands of years ago. Local legends talk about a mysterious ship that's been hidden in the area since ancient times, and that's what drew the explorers there in the first place. According to Jose Aguayo, the National Institute of Anthropology and History won't touch this discovery. It's not typical archaeology, he said. And if INAH ever did recognize the artifacts, it would, quote, basically accept one of the most denied facts, the existence of beings not from Earth. Deep inside South Africa's Rising Star cave system, so deep you've got to crawl through tight, pitch-black tunnels to even reach it, archaeologists found engravings that might be the earliest symbolic art ever made. And no, they weren't made by Homo sapiens. The markings, which are made up of lines and crosshatches, some seeming to be crude depictions of animals even, were carved into the rock walls near what appears to be a burial site. But if it wasn't Homo sapiens who etched them though, who was it? A distant human cousin called Homo naledi. They had smaller brains, only about a third the size of ours, but somehow they were making art. This turns out to be legit symbolic art. We're talking about a species that supposedly wasn't smart enough to do this kind of thing, actually doing it. And that messes with the whole bigger brain equals more advanced culture idea. As archaeologist Lee Berger put it, this could rewrite the story of human evolution. Yeah, these carvings are weird. The Valcamonica petroglyphs found in northern Italy are one of the biggest collections of prehistoric rock art in Europe. Over 140,000 carvings spread across the valley. Most of them are pretty typical for ancient times. You have animals, tools, hunters, ritual scenes, but then you've got these two figures. They've got bulky bodies, what look like tight-fitting suits, and big round heads with what appear to be antennae or helmets. Some people say they look exactly like astronauts. So people who are really into ancient alien type stuff love to point to these two figures as possible proof that early humans might have encountered visitors from another planet, beings wearing spacesuits. Another popular theory is that they might be visitors from the future, which is definitely a fun idea too. Now, obviously these could also be stylized depictions of gods or warriors. You know, definitely could be the case, but the truth is, nobody really knows for sure, because there's no writing to explain what the artists were trying to get across. Now, this one's got a real mystery vibe about it. The Cave of the Swimmers, found in Egypt's Sahara Desert, doesn't seem like something that should be on this list. I mean, we are talking about underwater discoveries, but hear me out. Inside this cave, you'll find a series of ancient paintings on the walls, and some of them seem to depict people swimming. something that doesn't quite add up. Why would ancient cave paintings show people swimming in the middle of the desert? I'm sure the Sahara hasn't always been a desert, but it has been for about 2 to 3 million years. These paintings, though, are only estimated to be around 10,000 years old, but they seem to show people swimming. So could there have once been a river or lake in the area that we just don't know about? The Cave of the Swimmers is famous for these unusual paintings that seem to suggest there was some kind of large body of water right where the desert is now. Lake Titicaca is a massive high-altitude lake between Bolivia and Peru. It's already famous for being one of the highest navigable lakes in the world, but here's where it gets really interesting. There's a submerged temple underneath it. Divers have found ruins in the lake that some believe could be connected to the ancient Tiwanaku civilization, a culture that existed in the Andes before the rise of the Inca. But the thing is, no one really knows how these structures ended up underwater. Some researchers believe that these temples were part of an ancient city, maybe even built to align with the stars or the movements of the sun, which was really important for Andean cultures. The theory is that Lake Titicaca could have been much lower in the far past, and that over time it flooded, swallowing parts of the city. Another thing that's really cool about these remains is that the stones used to build them aren't like any other stones found in the area. Definitely odd. Could this submerged site be part of a larger, forgotten civilization? Divers are still trying to map out just how far this site extends beneath the water. Now this one's really out there. Lake Baikal in Siberia is not only one of the oldest and deepest lakes in the world, but it's also a place where people claim to have found signs of an underwater alien base. The story goes that divers in the lake have reported seeing strange geometric shapes and metallic objects deep underwater. Some have even said they've seen alien beings. Some of these objects allegedly seem a little too perfectly shaped to be natural, and there are rumors that these objects could be remnants of a super advanced civilization, possibly even extraterrestrial, or that there's a currently existing alien base deep under the water. There have been reports of mysterious structures and strange energy fields being detected deep under the lake. Of course, it's said that these reports have been leaked by whistleblowers who have been told to stay quiet. What's really going on here? Are there just odd but natural rock formations, or is there something stranger going on? Lake Baikal is remote and deep enough that it could make for a pretty good place for a group of alien researchers to park their ships. Next up, we have the underwater cave beneath Paganica Bay in Croatia, which is not a recommended dive. The place is known for being incredibly dangerous. 4 people have died here between 2002 and 2015 on 3 separate occasions. In 2002, a diver was found dead 177 feet down in a cave wearing a dive suit but had no mask on. There was also a 12-inch blade sticking out of his chest. Now at first this seemed like a clear-cut case of foul play. 2 suspects were even arrested, but after they looked more into the diver's last dive profile from his dive computer, the cave's dimensions and other forensic evidence, it became clear that he'd likely taken his own life. It seemed that the diver, known only as MK, had gone in alone, got lost, and ran out of oxygen. As he began to drown, he found an air pocket, but knowing he wouldn't have enough air to make it back, he chose to go out quickly rather than suffer a slow, terrifying death from drowning.
Number 10, the Nutty Putty Cave. That sounds friendly, but this is not a good story. You would think that when you hear the words rescue arrived that you'd be able to heave a sigh of relief. But in the case of John Jones in 2009, sadly, that wasn't the case. John Jones and his family loved exploring caves together and decided to do so again on November 24th, 2009 as a way to connect before Thanksgiving. John went off to find the birth canal, a narrow passageway that explorers had to infamously shimmy through with their body. He entered what he thought was the canal but soon got stuck. He was with 9 other friends and family members. His brother Josh tried to pull him out, but instead John fell even further, pinning his arms. He was now trapped 400 feet into the cave, 100 feet below the Earth's surface. Rescuers tried everything. They tried everything, but their only hope was a pulley system which eventually failed. After 27 hours, John passed out due to the strain on his heart because he was at a really weird angle, and at just 26 years old with a 1-year-old daughter, John passed away. Number 9, Pocanaga Bay. In Pocanaga Bay, there is a cave that looks welcoming at first with a friendly passageway but soon leads divers 117 feet below trapping many inexperienced divers. Over the years, it has led to many lives being lost to its labyrinth of passageways. One of the most disturbing discoveries was a man found 54 meters down in 2002 with a knife lodged in his chest. His diving mask was removed, so at first police thought it was a case for murder. The man known as MK had gone diving with his friends, so it was plausible that one of them was to blame. But further investigation revealed that MK had actually gotten lost, ran out of air, and began drowning. As he swam up, he found a pocket of air, but not enough to sustain him until rescue came. He knew he was going to drown, so instead of drowning, he took his own life. Oh man, like already it's number 9 and it's just the worst. Like it gets worse, like it doesn't get better. Number 8, the Sterkfontein Caves. This event is a reminder that if you are going to take risks, always follow the plan, otherwise it may cost you your life. Peter Verheusel decided to explore the Sterkfontein Caves in South Africa in 1984 with a few of his friends. Despite guidelines, Peter couldn't resist exploring caves off the beaten path. The first couple of times it was alright, but the third time his friends couldn't find him. Peter had gone so far down a passage off the planned path that he eventually got lost with not enough air to return. So if you do that and you don't pack enough air, then you're screwed. Fortunately, Peter found a small island with a cave which meant that he wouldn't drown, but given that he was short on air, he couldn't return, meaning he had to wait for rescue. With no food, Peter was trapped in the pitch black darkness. I wish I could say this story had a happy ending, but it took 6 weeks for rescue to find him. Beside his body was a note he left for his wife and mother in the sand: "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." If you're gonna do that, make sure you pack extra oxygen. Oh my god. Anyways, my dad's a scuba diver. This freaks me out, okay? Number 7, Dion Dreyer. In 1994, a man named Dion Dreyer was lost 270 meters in Bushman's Hole in South Africa, and for 10 years, no one was able to get to him. But Dave Shaw, an experienced diver, was determined to do just that, retrieve his body so that he could be put to rest by his family. Shaw had set a number of diving records and was the only one to find Dreyer's body 207 meters down, covered in silt. Unable to retrieve it the first time, he promised to return. It was Shaw's 333rd dive in his life when he went back, but at those depths, any intense struggle could lead to a diver passing out. If a diver starts to inhale too quickly, something called hypercapnia can happen, which is when too much carbon dioxide fills the bloodstream and it can disorient you, you don't know which way is up anymore. While Dave was trying to cover the body with a body bag, the skeleton began to float, something he didn't account for. Catching it became a vicious struggle, and being an experienced diver, he knew better than to keep trying. But as he began his ascent, to try again later, his light got snagged on the cave line. He was already disoriented from the earlier exertion and began to panic, and Dave eventually passed out and died next to Dreyer. But later, their bodies floated to the surface, making it possible for divers to retrieve them both. So, in a way, he did make good on his word, but even as an experienced diver, things still went wrong. So, prepare yourselves. Always. Number 6, Floyd Collins and the Crystal Caves. The title makes it sound like it's some kind of mystical adventure, and for Floyd Collins it was, until very suddenly it wasn't. Floyd found the cave in 1917 and became so enthralled he wanted to explore every inch of it. Floyd spent close to a decade trekking through every narrow passageway, besting them all. That is, until one day he went an inch too far. Lantern in hand, he was trying to make it out before he lost light. While climbing his way up a passageway, Floyd bumped a 12-kilogram rock loose. In 127-hour style, the rock crushed his ankle and trapped him inside. Rescue teams spent 17 days trying to save him, and Collins became a celebrity, with people even setting up booths to sell food and drinks and souvenirs, all in preparation for his rescue. They tried everything and decided to resort to mining a new path, but sadly that took too long. Even though they gave him water and food, after fighting so long and so hard, Floyd passed away in the cave due to hypothermia.
The cenotes in the Yucatan Peninsula were super important to the Maya. These water-filled sinkholes weren't just places to get fresh water, they were seen as gateways to the underworld. For the Maya, they were more than just natural wonders. Guillermo de Anda, a specialist from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History, said these cenotes were, quote, the main scenario of the myth of creation for the Maya. And these cenotes really are like a hidden world. Above the surface, they look like beautiful spots with crystal clear water, lush vegetation, and massive stalactites. But underwater, these cenotes lead to massive labyrinths of underwater caves, some of which are still mostly unexplored. People practiced rituals here. Offerings, altars, even bones have been discovered deep inside, giving us a look at how crucial these places were to Mayan life. One of the most famous cave systems is Sakak'tun. It's the largest underwater cave in the world, believed to connect to other cave systems, possibly making the whole network over 1,000 kilometers or just over 620 miles long. Inside these caves, explorers have found Mayan artifacts, animal remains, and even evidence of human sacrifices. The cenotes and caves of the Yucatan could completely change how we understand the early Maya, with some of the discoveries hinting at settlements and rituals long before the rise of the classic Maya civilization. In the spring of 2017, divers Sam Meacham and Fred Davos squeezed their way through a tight passageway, only 28 inches wide, deep in Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. After swimming for half a mile, they finally reached what they couldn't believe was in front of them: a 11,000-year-old ochre mine, untouched and almost perfectly preserved. The site, named La Mina, was a time capsule. There were pits, broken stalactites used as hammers, and even old charcoal from fires. Early humans have been extracting red ochre pigment, which was later used in everything from cave paintings to mortuary rituals. Archaeologist Brandy MacDonald had been studying ochre for years and said this discovery was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The discovery gave the researchers a rare look into how some of the first people in the Americas lived, long before the rise of the Mayan civilization. Scientists also found remains of early humans, most famously the remains of a girl they named Naya, who fell to her death around 13,000 years before. The question was, why had she gone so deep into the caves? As Roberto Junco from Mexico's National Institute of Anthropology and History stated, what the hell were they going down there for? This wasn't an isolated site. Radiocarbon dating revealed at least 2 other ochre mines in the area, dating back between 10,000 and 12,000 years ago. This shows that early humans had a sophisticated knowledge of their environment, with well-planned mining expeditions that lasted thousands of years. It's still a bit of a mystery as to why they went so deep into these caves, but there's a strong possibility that they weren't just used for practical reasons, they may have been spiritual too. The ochre they were mining was obviously important, often used in rituals. Holly Moyes, an expert on cave rituals, talked about how caves in early human history were often seen as sacred spaces, saying caves produced all kinds of good and evil, adding that the deep dark environments were perfect for rituals. For the Maya and other Mesoamerican cultures, ochre was sacred, possibly seen as a way to connect with the underworld. The Hoyo Negro, or Black Hole, is one of the most mysterious underwater caves in Mexico, and for good reason. Found once again in the Yucatan Peninsula, this place is kind of a time capsule. Scientists have discovered some really unexpected treasures here. When divers first explored it, they found an almost perfectly preserved set of remains belonging to a human who would have lived around 13,000 years ago, one of the earliest inhabitants of the Americas. The bones were also found along the remnants of extinct animals like mammoths, giant ground sloths, and saber-toothed tigers. If you're into shipwrecks, the Black Sea is like an underwater treasure chest. In 2015, a team of researchers made one of the most incredible finds in the region, an ancient Greek shipwreck, over 2,000 years old. What's amazing about these shipwrecks is how well preserved they often are. Because the Black Sea has a layer of anoxic, oxygen-free water deep down, anything that sinks below this layer doesn't really rot. It's like a giant underwater freezer. The wrecks, including the famous Greek merchant ship, are almost perfectly preserved. The shipwreck, discovered in 2015, was found at about 2,000 meters or around 6,561 feet deep, and it was in incredible condition. The hull, the timbers, even the steering mechanism were all there. It was a huge discovery, being that it's so rare to find ancient wrecks in such good shape. This isn't the first or last wreck discovered here. There are dozens more, stretching back to the time of the ancient Greeks and Romans. The biggest question on everyone's mind now is what other surprises are sitting deep in the depths of the Black Sea? Could there be other sunken cities or undiscovered shipwrecks hiding down there? Well, the more researchers dive into the Black Sea, the more they find we've only scratched the surface.
At number 10, we have the Las Vegas Mole People. I had no idea that this was a thing, but apparently there are thousands of people living in the sewer tunnels tunnels underneath Las Vegas. YouTuber Wonton Don, with the help of the Shine the Light Foundation, went to explore and document some of these happenings. The Shine the Light Foundation focuses on getting people out of these tunnels and back into stable living conditions, and they help thousands of people each year. Because the people who choose to live in these tunnels aren't monks walking away from society, it's because they have massive drug addictions and can't afford to live anywhere else. The tunnels are predominantly dominated by two factions, the meth addicts and the heroin addicts. The Shine Light Foundation warns the film crew that they should be careful at certain points where they're filming, because some of the people down there are in hiding. They're hiding from pimps and dealers, and pointing their camera in the wrong direction could lead to a knife in the belly. Oof, that's kind of freaky. At number 9, we have the Sassi di Matera cave homes. Aerial shots of this place are some of the most beautiful things that I have ever seen. Homes carved out of caves created 9,000 years ago. This is the oldest inhabited city on the planet. In the modern era, there have been improvements like running water and electricity to make these homes livable, but after World War II, this place was one of the most dangerous places you could live in Italy. A massive malaria outbreak started killing thousands of people, and everyone was forced to evacuate the area. Since then, the area has been deemed safe again, but who knows when another outbreak could happen. At number 8, we have Nowhere to Go. Back in August of 2018, police got a call that some people had been jumping a fence in a gated area where there were man-made caves. These caves were close to the downtown core of Nottingham, England. It was a strange call, but it could have just been some teenagers that were going in to vandalize the place. When the police arrived, they didn't find teens trying to spray paint the walls, but some homeless people that were using the caves for shelter. There was no violence, the police just went in and talked to them a little to try and figure out what their situation was. It was a very sad and scary thing to see. People who need to climb into a cave just to have somewhere to live. At number 7, we have Flagman. That is the nickname given to Steve Badigan, who has chosen to leave everything he knew behind him and go live in a hole that he dug out of a plot of land that he owns. He's right off the highway in Denver, and to him the idea of living a life of luxury is more repulsive than an eating challenge on Fear Factor. You remember that? When people were eating bugs and genitals for $250,000 for our entertainment? That was a beautiful time. Well, Steve probably doesn't even know anything about Fear Factor because he just grows potatoes and lives without any electricity. He's got a dog though, so I trust this dude. He's doing something right. The government wants to kick him off his land because he's living on residential land and his home is technically a giant pile of garbage. But he will not go down without a fight. He says nothing will stop him from living free in his little man-made cave hole. At number 6, we have Dan Suello. This isn't the first guy who has taken a look at his life and said, screw this. I'm gonna leave everything behind and just take off into the wild. Some people see the daily grind, going to work at a 9-to-5 job just to pay bills and have a limited social life, going out to drink just to wake up with a hangover, and they say, I'm done. That's what Dan Suello did. He looked at his living situation and life, and then he said, I don't want to do this anymore. He took the money that he had, he left it behind in a phone booth, and then he drove to the Utah Canyonlands. The landscape is littered with caves and wild growing vegetables. For almost 2 decades, he's been living out in the wilderness without using any sort of modern technology. Part of why he did this is because he believes the system is broken and something needs to be done of how life is lived. He felt people were too dependent on a life of comfort and that it was slowly taking its toll on humanity. And of course, wearing down the planet. He wanted to be an example of how you don't have to live by the status quo.
Number 5. The Mosdale Cavern Disaster. The Mosdale Cavern Disaster. In 1967, John Ogden was with 5 adventurers prepared to take on a 2-mile deep, uncharted part of England's Mosdale Caverns. While they were already hours deep into their trek, it started raining. A lot. A full-on flood overwhelmed the entrance to the cave, sealing off any chance they had of escaping. Water poured in every direction and soon a stampede of rushing water swept past them. As the water rose, Ogden was the only one able to reach a small crack of air in the rocks ahead. Ugh, so sad. There was only room for one, and the rest of his team perished in the waters below. I can only imagine the absolute terror he must have felt alone and trapped in a narrow crevice. Still, he survived as long as possible, but by the time they found him, he too had died. Number 4. The Plura Caves. So by now, right? We know that splunking in caves in general can be terrifying, but add scuba gear and it's a whole other level of craziness. A group of experienced divers decided to enter Norway's Plura Cave in February 2014, and they would be some of the last to do so. so. The pond that led to the cave had frozen, so they cut a hole in the ice before diving in. The plan was to swim to the other side, but one of the scuba divers named Jari had gotten halfway before he gotten stuck in a narrow passage. He panicked, and in order to prevent hypercapnia, his friend Patrick handed him a cylinder to limit the carbon dioxide in his system. To his horror, as he tried to switch, Jari helplessly swallowed water and died. Patrick had to stay calm, otherwise the same fate would meet him, and therefore had to abandon his friend's body and keep going. Another man named Kai was behind him with another man named Jari, who also ran into some trouble. Jari, upon seeing the body, panicked and sadly fell to the same fate despite Kai coming to his aid. As Kai was the last diver, the exit was now blocked and he had to trek back the way he came. He emerged 11 hours later, and it wasn't until 2 months later that the bodies could be retrieved secretly by the same men who left them because they closed the Plura Cave. The Plura Cave is now closed to even the most experienced divers. No one is allowed. Alright guys, we are coming up to our top 3, and if you like this video and want to see more like it, you know what to do. Press that button. Tell us you like us. Subscribe for more. It makes us happy, and then we like making you happy, so. Number 3, the Cave Creek disaster. In 1995, 17 students were visiting New Zealand's Cave Creek and everything was supposed to be fine. They had a guide. The weather was fine. They weren't exploring narrow crevices underwater. The path was designed for tourists like them. But then, a couple of students noticed a flimsy looking platform. As teenagers are wanted to do, they made fun of it, assuming that it was stronger than it looked, so they jumped on it. But the builders had made a deadly mistake. They had used nails instead of bolts to secure it in place and had no engineering background. The platform gave way and the students plummeted 130 feet onto rocks. One survived by gripping a handrail all the way down, but out of the 17, only 4 survived. Number 2, Paninkin Plains Cave. Mixing in some happier endings in our top 10 list, we have the story of Andrew White and his team. In 1988, Andrew was with a team of 15 people excited to explore one of the deepest caves in the world. A rare cyclonic storm had other plans for the group when it caused the middle section of the entire cave to collapse. They were trapped underground and couldn't go back the way they came. They hung tightly next to a small ledge and the roof above them looked as though it was about to collapse. Andrew took on the courageous task of swimming through the water to find a way out. It took the team over 24 hours to be let out, and thankfully, they all survived! Yeah, like the first story we have where they all survived. Luckily, Andrew recorded the whole thing and ended up releasing an award-winning documentary called Nullarbor Dreaming. Despite surviving this experience though, Andrew passed away in a helicopter crash in 2012 in New South Wales. Last but not least, Nam Talu Cave Flood. Rule number 1 of risk-taking on vacation: if the locals warn against it, listen to them. This last story is truly heartbreaking and a solemn reminder to any who do not heed warnings. In October 2007, Helena Carroll, her fiance John Cullen, a Swiss family with 2 girls, plus another family with a young boy and 2 guides, decided to trek the Nam Talu Cave. The problem was, it was monsoon season, and locals warned them not to attempt it. Halfway into the cave, they heard a roar behind them, and you can guess what happened. A freak flood swept both families and the guides away, but John saved Helena by pulling her up on the ledge. Consumed by the idea that they might die there, John decided to brave the water to try and get help, leaving Helena all alone. She hung there for 8 hours until help finally came. When she exited the cave, she made the grim discovery that she was the only one who'd survived, and she lost the love of her life.
In Talampaya National Park in Argentina, you'll find these strange carvings etched into the walls, some of them dating back around 2,000 to 3,000 years. They're known as the petroglyphs of the Cienaga culture, and while some of them show normal stuff like animals, others are a bit harder to explain. One figure in particular that gets brought up a lot is this one here. Look at the big round heads, the lack of a face. They almost look like they're wearing helmets, like spacesuits. The proportions are way off from typical human figures, and there are no clear weapons or tools or clothing to suggest it's a hunter or a warrior. Of course, this is where, again, the ancient alien theories come in. People think these carvings might show beings that early humans saw but didn't fully understand. In 2023, archaeologists digging around the Karga Oasis in Egypt, about 100 miles west of Luxor, came across a weird rock panel. It's now got people debating what the hell it actually shows. At first glance, the carvings look like spiders, webs, maybe bugs caught in the web, and That's exactly what Egyptologist Salim Ikram said it was. Most of the headlines ran with that version of the story. Creepy prehistoric spiders etched into stone, cool enough, but some researchers think there might be more to this. Dr. Derek Cunningham came out with a totally different angle. He believes the patterns are actually ancient astronomy. They line up with important numbers used to predict solar and lunar eclipses. For example, he says the spider-looking shapes are tilted at exactly 13.66 degrees, which matches half of a sidereal month. That's basically how long it takes the moon to line up with the same distant stars again. Then there's Michael Leto, who thinks the symbols represent constellations and zodiac signs, possibly used for some kind of star map. So in a bunch of European caves, researchers started noticing weird marks next to the animal paintings. Not the animals themselves, but symbols, repeating shapes like dots, slashes, crosses, and these odd Y figures. First, everyone figured it was just a really early form of board doodling, but a study in 2023 argued something much bigger, that this might be the world's oldest form of writing. They don't always seem to be random marks, they follow patterns. Researchers think these early humans, some 20,000 years ago, were actually keeping track of time. Specifically, they were recording when certain animals mated or migrated by marking lunar months. One of the lead researchers said it's a, quote, really big deal cognitively, going on to explain it shows they were organizing information outside of their brains, on surfaces, which is basically the first step toward writing and recording data. They were tracking breeding cycles, trying to predict animal behavior, and to think this kind of thing could have been going on during the Ice Age inside pitch-black caves, well, that's pretty wild. Deep in southern Russia, in a spot called the Skelnovsky Grotto, now it's kind of hard to tell based on these images, but archaeologists studied some rock carvings here and found that they look a lot like someone's first-hand account of a meteor crashing to Earth. The petroglyph dates back to the Bronze Age. It shows what seems to be a giant object falling from the sky, breaking into pieces, and scattering debris. Researchers think this might be the earliest known eyewitness record of something like this. An ancient person trying to document a meteor explosion the only way they could, by carving it into rock. One team even matched the direction the object was moving in the carving to real landmarks on the ground, like blast zones and impact craters nearby, and it lines up. So whoever made this wasn't just telling a story, they were recording something they saw, something that would have been utterly terrifying, by the way. They probably thought the world was ending. In the remote Kimberley region of northwestern Australia, you'll find the Wandjina cave paintings, ancient Aboriginal artwork that shows figures that are nothing like the usual stick figure hunting scenes or animal drawings you see in other parts of the world. Instead, the Wandjina are drawn with big round heads, little mouths or no mouths at all, massive black eyes, and white faces that almost look like they're glowing. Some are surrounded by halos or lines that shoot out from their heads. And if you're thinking, well, that kind of sounds like your classic alien in modern day, well, you're not alone. The local Aboriginal people say the Wandjina are powerful ancestral spirits, sky beings that brought law, culture, and even rain. Some believe these aren't just mythological spirits, but actual beings that ancient people saw with their own eyes. The mouthless faces, the oversized eyes, the auras, they all feel oddly familiar in today's world of UFO sightings and alien reports. Were the Wandjina just ancient gods, or something they imagined, or could they have been an entity that showed up in the sky thousands of years ago? In the Bastar region of India's Chhattisgarh state, near the town of Charama, archaeologists rediscovered a bunch of rock paintings in 2014 that were pretty incredible. First off, the paintings date back about 10,000 years. Imagine looking up close at something some ancient person from 10,000 years ago painted with their bare hands. Aside from the age though, some of this art looks oddly out of place. A lot of it looks more science fiction than your typical spear-wielding hunters and animals you get with most cave paintings. There are humanoid figures with what look like antennae on their heads. Some appear to be flying in disc-shaped crafts with 3 legs, and a lot of these figures just look kinda for lack of a better word, alien. Now, is that just a coincidence? Were they depicting gods that they just happened to envision the same way aliens are in modern day, or were they actually seeing something? Archaeologist J.R. Bagat, who studies these closely, said these might be depictions of ancient encounters with extraterrestrials, or at least ancient humans' imagination of alien beings. See, local tribes have legends about the Roala, or the small-sized ones, said to have come from the sky in flying machines, abducting villagers before disappearing. Sound familiar? The Lascaux caves in southwestern France are some of the most famous prehistoric sites in the world, filled with detailed paintings of animals like bulls, deer, and horses, but beyond the impressive animal art, there's something strange here as well. Abstract signs and dots. Now, could they just be decoration? Sure, but some researchers think these marks might be more than that. Early star charts or lunar calendars. Basically, these prehistoric people could have been tracking the moon's phases or the positions of stars to keep time. That would be pretty nuts, because it means they would have had some understanding of astronomy long before we thought people ever did. It could be much more than just making art for art's sake. They may have been recording knowledge, passing it down for generations. Sticking with France, Chauvet Cave is also packed with some of the oldest and most detailed cave paintings in the world, dating back about 33,000 years. Among the artwork, researchers again spotted a series of dots that some believe aren't just there for the sake of it, but actually show the phases of the moon. The lunar cycle lasts about 29 days, and these dots might have been an early way to track it, basically an ancient calendar. To pull this off, whoever made these marks had to observe the moon over many nights and understand its changes. That means early humans weren't just focused on daily survival, but instead were paying close attention to the sky and time. Tracking the moon would have been super useful too, helping with hunting seasons, gathering, timing rituals. And besides the dots, the paintings themselves are just impressive. There's a lot more detail in these images than you usually see in ancient cave art. There's shading being used here. The animals have more depth and shape to them. They look almost lifelike, and that alone makes these cave markings seem more advanced for the time. But these dots, they could be the earliest evidence of our ancestors mixing art and science in a way we might not expect from people living such a long time ago. Guanyingdong Cave in China has some of the earliest evidence of the lavalos stone tool technique, dating back anywhere from 170,000 to 80,000 years. But what is the lavalos technique? Well, this was a game changer in prehistoric technology, because instead of just smashing rocks together and hoping for the best, you'd start with a chunk of stone, usually flint or something similar, and shape it into a very specific form. This chunk is what archaeologists call a core. The idea was to carefully trim and prepare the surface of this core so that when they finally struck it in just the right spot, a flake would pop off that was already shaped into a useful tool. So they weren't shaping the flake after breaking it, they were shaping the core beforehand so that the flake came off ready to use. And since the shaping was intentional, it was repeatable. They could knock off several usable flakes from one core, all similar in shape and size. That's a huge step up from just hitting two rocks together and hoping something sharp breaks off. Hohlefels Cave in southwestern Germany is a gold mine for ancient stuff. Archaeologists found the Venus of Hohlefels here, which is a tiny figurine carved from mammoth ivory. And yes, that means it was actually carved from a mammoth's tusk. This 2.5-inch figurine is supposed to be a woman. What immediately pops out are the cartoonishly large breasts and hips. In fact, they're so big you can barely see this woman's head. Now, I don't think this was meant to be a dig, although that's possible, but most archaeologists believe this was meant to symbolize fertility. Maybe this was some sort of goddess figure. People back then cared a lot about fertility because survival depended on it. I mean, I guess it still does, but it really did back then. So this figurine was probably super important. Along with that, they found musical instruments made from bird bones and, again, mammoth ivory, flutes with finger holes that could play actual notes, not just one sound. Carving those flutes would have taken very sharp tools and serious skill. I mean, making finger holes without cracking the bone would have been no easy task.
We have Murphy's Cave, commonly referred to as Mark Twain Cave and the Lost Boys. Murphy's This cave, found in Hannibal, Missouri, was discovered between 1819 and 1820. The cave is 3 miles long with 4 separate entrances and 260 passages, along with a year-round temperature of 52 degrees Fahrenheit, 11 degrees Celsius, so pretty cold. 57 years ago, on May 9th of 1967, the group of 3, by the names of Joey, Billy, and Craig, set out to explore the extensive cave system after having their interest sparked by Joey's apparent sighting of an alien spaceship over a nearby cliff, and after being warned multiple times not to enter the cave due to the extreme dangers they might face if they did. But of course the warning was unheeded and the boys set off on their expedition. When they did not return home in the evening, the first reported instance of chaos began to ensue, as we really have no way of knowing what other kind of chaos the boys experienced during their time underground. A search party was sent to explore the area, and unfortunately the trio was never found, but many eyewitnesses reported to have seen a mysterious figure over the very same cliff in which Joey claims to have seen the UFO. While the case was never closed, 3 theories for the boys' disappearance do exist. 1, that they were lost to the caves. 2, that they had run away, however this theory is the least accepted given the positive state of the boys' home lives. And 3, that they were abducted. Unfortunately, we really have no way of knowing, but I would recommend staying clear of this location and all of its dark twists and turns. Next we have Mammoth Cave, which has been a hotbed for disappearances over the years, boasting an alarming 10 known cases of persons who went missing, one of which was Orla Allen K. Barrick. The woman was last seen around 2 p.m. on April 12th of 1996 and went missing that same night and was never seen again. When police forced their way into her home, they found blood on the carpet and a burnt cigarette on the shelf. Barrick's hair was also later found in the Green River surrounding the cave, but no body was ever located. Next was Michael Leyland Vincent, who disappeared in March of 2011, an ex-convict who lived near the cave. In 2004, a 54-year-old man by the name of Roland Baldwin met a similar fate after going for an ATV ride near the caves, after which he never returned. When a search group went out to the area in an attempt to locate the man, all they found was the ATV abandoned, along with Baldwin's glasses, shoes, and an unfinished bottle of whiskey. Tony Ray Cheote, Josephine Petit, Walter Greg Flower, Lost John, and 3 Jane Does were also reported to have gone missing in and around the cave, and how many others might have met the same fate, we really have no way of knowing. Next we have Kenny Veach, who was a hiker, YouTuber, and Area 51 enthusiast up until his final known days in 2014. The 47-year-old, who was an experienced hiker, claimed to have found a cave near the assumed alien bunker Area 51. The cave, whose opening was shaped as a capital letter M, thus nicknamed simply the M Cave, would go on to garner extreme popularity and be the source of much speculation as well as a string of conspiracy theories. Veach first mentioned the cave in a comment under a YouTube video in 2014. He said that he had been hiking out by Neal's Air Force Base next to Area 51 and found the hidden cave. And he also added that while he usually enters into every cave that he finds, he decided not to this time, as when he stepped towards the entrance, he said his whole body began to vibrate, and the closer he got, the more severe the vibrations came. Despite his first encounter with the mysterious cave, and after some encouragement from his followers, Veach did eventually decide to revisit it, but he and many others were left disappointed as he was unable to locate the Big M on his second expedition. On November 10th of 2014, Veach decided to try his luck again and headed out to try and find the cave once more, but unfortunately that was the last anyone ever heard from him, as he did never return home from his final voyage. Speculation as to what could have happened to Kenny took off and ranged from Veach uncovering government secrets and alien forces all the way to being mauled by an animal or perhaps even faking his own death. However, one comment left on the missing YouTuber's page posted before his final expedition really stood out. The comment read, "Do not go back there. If you find the cave entrance, do not go in. You won't get out." Sand Cave, also known as Kentucky's underground enigma, is up next. The cave is no longer accessible due to safety concerns after a man by the name of Floyd Collins was trapped in its sandy maze for 18 days and was later found dead within its walls. Floyd, born July 20th of 1887, was an American American cave explorer in the state of Kentucky. He lived to be just 37 years old after an accident occurred during an exploration in which Collins had hopes to discover a new entrance to the nearby Mammoth Cave, and of which he did not return. Floyd was a highly experienced explorer, so when he didn't make it back from his expedition, people naturally began to worry, and so a search team was sent out after him, of which only 2 were able to successfully reach the man. It appeared Floyd had become trapped by a rock that had fallen from the unstable sand and limestone walls of the cave, and many men spent many days attempting to come up with a solution for his rescue, during which Floyd's brother, Homer Collins, would slink down into the place his brother had been captured by the mountain's underground tunnels and provide him with food and water, all the while trying to remove the rubble that held him in his place. Unfortunately, though, he was unsuccessful. On the 18th day, however, rescuers were able to finally reach Floyd, but the efforts proved to be futile as Collins had sadly passed due to exposure from the elements, and not only that, but the sand cave had sealed Floyd's body within his walls. So it wasn't until several months later that his body was able to be extracted, and he was buried near his family's home. However, it seems he was eventually moved, as his body now rests in the Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery as a tribute to his work in cave exploration. Cathedral Caverns, yet another culprit for a life-threatening disappearance on March 22nd of 2000, when a young man by the name of Justin Lovett disappeared inside the popular tourist attraction located in Langdale, England. The entrance to the cave is an impressive 126 feet wide and 25 feet high, and makes way to a 0.75-mile-long walking path. Inside the cave, you will find a frozen waterfall, and as you venture further, a giant forest of massive stalagmites protruding from the floors of the cavern. So while it is really no surprise that Lovett wanted to explore the cave, what was surprising was the fact that he didn't return home that night. Fearing the worst, his mother put together a search party to canvass the pitch-black cave for any traces of her son Justin, who anything in the darkness. Thankfully, after just 8 hours of having disappeared into the cave's vastness, Lovett was returned to his mother by a group of rescuers. He said the experience was a warning not to attempt something like this ever again without 3 sources of light and the accompaniment of another person.
Some caves are so tight and dangerous, not even rescue teams can retrieve those who get trapped. Nutty Putty Cave in Utah sounds like a cute place, but it has always been notorious for its narrow, twisting tunnels. But in 2019, it became the site of a modern-day tragedy that shocked the caving world. John Edward Jones, an experienced spelunker, became wedged headfirst in a passage only 10 inches wide. I literally feel claustrophobic just talking about it. Over 100 rescuers tried for more than a day to save him, but the rock's tight grip and dangerous angles made extraction impossible. He unfortunately died inside the passage, and the cave was permanently sealed with his body still inside. Today, it stands as a tragic monument to how even modern caves can become terrifying, inescapable tombs. They found over 7,000 bones belonging to at least 28 individuals, all dropped into a death shaft. Hidden in the mountains of Spain lies the Pit of Bones, a vertical cave shaft that holds one of the most significant prehistoric discoveries ever made. Over 7,000 fossilized bones were found here, dating back roughly 430,000 years, all from early human ancestors. But it wasn't just the number of bones, it was how they were deposited. These bodies seemed to have been intentionally dropped into the shaft, possibly representing one of the earliest known burial practices. One skull in particular showed 2 violent impacts to the head, possibly the earliest known crime ever recorded. Imagine a lion-like predator that could climb trees and dismember prey, and then finding its skeleton underground. There is a cave in South Australia that preserves an incredible collection of extinct megafauna, including the marsupial lion. These animals, which lived up to 40,000 years ago, were about the size of a jaguar, had razor-sharp teeth, and were likely ambush predators capable of climbing trees. An absolutely terrifying combo. Dozens of their skeletons have been found alongside giant kangaroos, enormous wombats, and even diprotodons, prehistoric herbivores the size of a car. These caves acted as natural pitfall traps, catching any creature that stumbled too close. And when scientists started piecing together the scene, it wasn't hard to imagine the fear these now extinct predators once inspired. Some caves haven't revealed disturbing secrets yet, because no one's ever been inside. Beneath the thick glacial ice sheets of Greenland, NASA researchers using ground-penetrating radar have mapped out enormous subglacial cave systems, many of them hundreds of feet deep and stretching for miles. These are not fictional, they are real caves shaped by geothermal heat and hidden under nearly a mile of ice. Some lead to vast underground rivers or empty chambers, and no human has ever entered them. What lies inside is still unknown. They could hold ancient microbial life, preserved air from a prehistoric atmosphere, or even entire ecosystems cut off from the surface for millions of years. For now, they're too dangerous to enter, but just knowing they exist makes your imagination run wild.
Vanguard Cave is part of a sea cliff on the Rock of Gibraltar, and for about 40,000 years a section of it was completely sealed by sand and debris. When researchers finally dug into it, they found a chamber that hadn't been seen since Neanderthals were walking the earth. Inside were fossilized bones from animals like lynxes, hyenas, and seals, along with stone tools. It looks like the Neanderthals had used the space for shelter and possibly for food storage. The cave was sealed so well that the inner chamber stayed totally preserved. Archaeologists even found evidence of hearths where fires had been lit, with layers of ash and charred bones stacked up under the sand. What's strange is how long this place stayed buried. The sand kept everything in a vacuum-like state for tens of thousands of years. We're only now starting to understand how Neanderthals lived by studying what they left behind in that sealed chamber. La Roque-Cotard Cave in France was sealed by sediment somewhere between 57,000 and 75,000 years ago, and it stayed that way until it was recently excavated. What they found inside were scratch marks on the cave walls in patterns, not just completely random. The engravings were made by Neanderthals, not modern humans, which makes them the oldest known Neanderthal cave art ever discovered. That's a big deal, because for a long time scientists didn't think Neanderthals were really capable of self-expression like this. So this cave changes that. There weren't any paintings or animals drawn, just these etched patterns, but still pretty cool. Along with the engravings, they've found stone tools and animal bones, meaning that people had spent a good deal of time in there. So this one's really cool because it was found under a medieval castle. At Pembroke Castle in Wales, there's a cave called Wogan Cavern that had been sealed off by a buildup of mineral deposits, basically a bunch of stalagmites that blocked the entrance for tens of thousands of years. When researchers got inside, they found evidence that people had used the cave at least 40,000 years ago. That puts it in the same time range as both early Homo sapiens and the last of the Neanderthals in Britain. They found stone tools, butchered animal bones, and traces of fires. Some of the bones were from species that don't live in Britain anymore, like reindeer and mammoths. The cave goes pretty deep beneath the castle. This whole other world was sitting under a medieval fortress, and nobody knew it was there. Archaeologists are still figuring out who exactly lived there and when, but the age and condition of the site makes it one of the most important prehistoric discoveries in the UK. The Mustang Caves, also called the Sky Caves, are up in northern Nepal, carved right into cliff faces, some more than 150 feet above the ground. They're not sealed by rocks or ice or anything, but by how remote and hard to reach they are. A lot of these caves haven't been touched in hundreds of years. Some were used as homes, others as burial spots or monasteries. The oldest ones go back over 2,000 years. When explorers started checking them out in the early 2000s, they found caves packed with mummified bodies, old manuscripts written on palm leaves, paintings. In some caves, bodies were bundled up, skulls stacked neatly, and there were religious items placed with them. One chamber had more than 40 skeletons lying side by side. Other caves had Buddhist murals that still looked pretty fresh, all things considered, even though they're over 800 years old. The entrances are so tricky to get to that nobody's totally sure how people even accessed them back then. I mean, because of the dry air and high altitude though, everything stayed preserved way better than it would have anywhere else.
Next on the list we have a vortex spring, an underwater cave system in the state of Florida, also the largest diving facility in the state. The site boasts multiple man-made caves as well as a cavern with depths of 115 feet, 35 meters. Snorkeling in the area is open to the public, but to dive into the tunnel-like cave systems requires both dive and cave certifications, both of which Ben McDaniels had previously obtained before taking his last known dive on August 18th of 2010. McDaniels, age 30, born in Memphis, Tennessee, was working on becoming a dive instructor in the hopes of opening up his own dive business. On the day of his disappearance, he had successfully completed a morning dive at a depth of 58 feet, 17.6 meters, after which he refilled his tanks in a nearby dive shop. Around 7:30, he began to attempt his second dive of the day, of which he unfortunately never returned. Left behind was McDaniels' truck, wallet, driver's license, dive logs, and a map he had made of the Springs cave systems. The last known person he had spoken to was his mother in a phone call before his descent. For months after the disappearance, dive experts searched the area except for an extremely dangerous area in the back of the cave system, and no body was ever recovered. The only trace of McDaniels found within the massive cave was 2 air tanks placed together near the underwater entrance, which seemed odd since generally tanks would be placed apart from one another as life-saving pit stops should a diver ever become low on oxygen when making their trip back up towards the surface. While Ben McDaniels is believed to have drowned within the cave, he is still classified as a missing person today. Okay, this next one is Barome Moor Cave. The cave was discovered in 1961 in Perry County in southeastern Missouri after a sinkhole revealed a natural underground tunnel system. When the cave was found, scientists discovered that it was home to several unique and uncommon species, including amphipods, cave salamanders, and grotto salamanders. Not only that, but footprints discovered in the still soft mud were determined to have been made from an extinct species of jaguar. On June 9th of 2022, a report was filed after a 13-year-old dog by the name of Abby went missing from a Missouri home located near the cave. It seems as though the animal had just vanished, as no trace of its presence could be detected anywhere in the area except for a few of her footprints near one of the cave's entrances. On August 6th of 2022, a recreational cave explorer by the name of Rick Haley visited the site in an attempt to map the cave, but he ended up with way more than he bargained for when he heard the sound of Abby's barks coming up through the walls of the cave. A rescue mission began that involved moving the dog through a 500-foot, 15-meter vertical climb through the tight walls of the cave. Now this one is a feel-good story as the rescue was successful and Abby was returned home after having been missing for just over 2 months within the tight confines of the cave. How she survived, we have no clue, but we're really glad that she's okay. The Chinhoy Caves are up next. The beautiful caves located in A1 north-central Zimbabwe, which are made up of limestone and dolomite and contain a beautiful pool that goes 200 meters, 656 feet deep, were used as a hiding place during wartime in Africa. Not only that, but the caves are famously guarded by many spirits who are said to punish those who enter and do not comply with their specific set of rules for respecting both them and the cave. Some of these rules include explorers of the cave having to ask permission for entry, not being able to show panic or fear, nor being able to laugh while inside its cold walls, as well as not partaking in any mischief. The punishment for these offenses? One would disappear within the cave, never to be seen again. It is also said that it's impossible to throw stones into the pool of the cave, which some claim to be never-ending, as the spirits living there would stop the stone from ever hitting the surface of the water, thus no ripples exist within. Locals claim that there have been many disappearances over the years due to misbehavior on the grounds, but no official reports have ever been filed. Next up we have the Wind Cave, discovered in 1881 by brothers Jess and Tom Bingham after they had heard loud whistling noises coming from a small hole in the ground, the cave's only original natural opening, which was later expanded upon to allow for exploration of the site. A vast underground cave system located in southwestern South Dakota, whose many chambers are lined with honeycomb-like calcite structures. years. The area became a popular destination for hikers, one of whom was named Rachel Cox. On October 22nd of 1989, Cox, age 18, along with a group of others, was partaking in a mock search and rescue mission inside the cave when Cox thought she had seen one of her instructors slip through a small passageway inside. She and her partner followed, but after realizing they had gone the wrong way, her partner slipped back through the hole from which he came. Cox waited, then decided to do the same, but suddenly her lamp went out. She stood in darkness, waiting for her partner to return, but after a few minutes, she decided she could just as easily feel her way back to the crevice and crawl out herself. Only she crawled through the wrong space and wound up even more lost than she had been just moments before. Over the course of her 36-hour disappearance, she became cold and desperate, cursing herself for being stupid enough to crawl into a crevice when her lamp was so low on fuel, and Cox even admitted that at one point she believed the cave had begun speaking to her. When she was finally rescued, she saw a bright light as a man with a big beard reached out his hand and asked, "Rachel, are you ready to leave now?" Rachel, exhausted, replied, "Are you God?" and then waited another 2 hours as the team of rescuers pulled her shaking, dehydrated, and weak from the cave back into the outside world. And finally, we have Ellison's Cave, the 12th deepest cave in the United States. Along with many small crevices, the cave is home to an incredible 586-foot, 178.6 meter drop, nicknamed the Fantastic Pit. However, not so fantastic for some, as there have been multiple known cases of people who have rappelled down into its depths only to have it be the last thing they ever did. This unfortunately was the tragic case for two University of Florida students by the name of Michael Peary and Grant Lockenbat. On February 12th of 2011, the pair had set out with a group of friends to explore the landmark, but apparently broke off from the pack at some point during the expedition. Dressed in shorts and a t-shirt, Grant was the first to attempt a 120-foot descent through an area in the cave containing a waterfall. But it seems somewhere along the way, his backpack became caught up in the rope he had been using to rappel down the cavern, and he became stuck. Michael, who was the more experienced climber of the two and unaware of the fatal outcome, decided to go down after Grant in order to provide some assistance. It is said that the group was able to locate the two and even spoke to them for about 45 minutes until the voices of the two young men began to die out and eventually disappeared. The deceased were recovered and removed from the cave later that night, and while the cause of death was never officially declared, many believe that the two died of hypothermia due to extreme cold temperatures within the cave. The passing of Michael and Grant, along with many others within the parameters of Ellison's Cave, serve as a warning of the extreme dangers of cave exploration. In fact, a few years later, a group of YouTubers went back to explore the cave where the teens were lost and ended up finding another group of people stuck in the rappel. They saved them, but imagine if they weren't there.
The Sun Temple at Mesa Verde National Park in southwestern Colorado was built into a cliff alcove shaped kind of like a big D. The people who built it, the ancestral Pabloans, used real geometry to design it. The shape and structure follow certain patterns, like the 3-4-5 triangle, which is a simple way to make perfect corners. Something called the golden rectangle, a layout that shows up in art, nature, and architecture because it just feels balanced. Obviously, this kind of precision doesn't just happen by accident. They had to know how to measure, how to mark angles, and how to lay everything out so the pieces fit together exactly right. On top of that, parts of the temple line up with the sun during the summer and winter solstices, meaning the builders were also tracking how the sun moved through the sky. That would have helped them keep time, mark the seasons, and plan ceremonies and planting cycles. Blumbo's Cave is on the southern coast of South Africa, looking out over the Indian Ocean. Inside, archaeologists found pieces of ochre, which is iron-rich clay that turns a rusty red or brown color when it dries. It's soft enough to carve, but durable enough to hold those carvings for tens of thousands of years. People back then would grind it up to make paint or use it as a kind of an early crayon, but what they found in this cave were blocks of ochre with carefully carved patterns. These engravings are around 75,000 years old. Some have cross-hatched lines, some look like grids, others have angles or zigzags. They're more than just random scratches. They were made with tension, using stone or bone tools to create repeated, even patterns, and it's not like they were carving animals or people, you know, the usual stuff you see in cave art. These were abstract shapes, which doesn't sound all that impressive, but think of what this means. They weren't just copying what they saw. They were thinking in symbols. As for what the symbols mean, maybe it was some sort of language, an early form of code, or maybe it was just decorative. Whatever the purpose though, it proves that people that far back were already thinking creatively, instead of just hunting and surviving like animals. Altamira Cave in northern Spain has some of the best preserved prehistoric paintings ever discovered. These were found in the late 1800s, and at that time people thought they were fake, because no one believed humans that old could make art this good. The paintings date back around 36,000 years. They mostly show bison, deer, and horses, done in natural colors like reds, blacks, and browns. What's crazy though is how lifelike some of these are. Instead of just arbitrarily applying paint to the walls, in some cases they actually use the curves of the cave to give the animals more shape. Beyond that, there are again symbols, dots, and handprints. Some researchers think those markings might have been used to track lunar or seasonal cycles, acting like an early calendar. Tassili Najir is a massive plateau in the middle of the Sahara Desert in southeastern Algeria. Here you'll find thousands of ancient rock paintings and carvings spread across more than 70,000 square kilometers. Most of it's animals, hunting scenes, day-to-day life, pretty standard for prehistoric art, but there's a small group of figures that really stand out. These ones don't look like hunters or herders or anything immediately recognizable. Some look like they're wearing helmets or full-body suits. A few appear to have large, round heads with no facial features and limbs that are thin and stretched. Some call them the Great Martian Gods. One of the most famous is known as the Roundhead, a figure with a bulbous head surrounded by smaller human-like figures reaching up toward it. Some even appear to be hovering or floating, not standing on any surface. And there are also shapes that look kind of like discs or capsules. Could they be depictions of deities or shamans in ritual clothing? Definitely possible. But what if these deities were actually something they were seeing? Visitors from the sky. The story of the Drapa stone starts in 1937 when a Chinese expedition led by Professor Chi Pute supposedly discovered a burial site high in the Bayan Har Mountains near the border of Tibet and China. Inside they claimed to have found small skeletons with large skulls and thin, frail bodies, about 4 feet tall. Alongside the remains were hundreds of round stone discs, each about a foot in diameter, with a small hole in the center and 2 spiral grooves carved into the surface. Those spirals were said to contain thousands of tiny characters that could only be seen with magnifying glasses. Years later, a man named Sum Nui allegedly translated them at the Beijing Academy for Prehistoric Research. The translation apparently told the story of an alien spacecraft that crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years before. The beings, called the Drapa, had come from another star system and were stranded. Some of the locals accepted them, others did not. The discs supposedly recorded their journey, their crash, their struggle to survive. Nui's report was said to have been dismissed by the academic community. He was mocked so badly that he left China and ended up dying in Japan, and the story resurfaced in 1966 from a Soviet journalist who wrote about the discs. But no museum ever officially displayed the stones, and they've since disappeared.
The bones showed strange markings, but when scientists realized what caused them, they were horrified. In Guff's Cave at Cheddar Gorge, archaeologists found the remains of 3 people, all with signs of defleshing. But this wasn't animal activity. The cut marks on the bones matched the same patterns seen in prehistoric human consumption. And the worst part? Skull fragments showed clear signs of being turned into drinking cups. This wasn't people eating done for survival, it was ritual. Radiocarbon dating places the event around 15,000 years ago, meaning that deep in the darkness, long before written history, people were eating each other, for reasons we still don't fully understand. This wasn't just any prehistoric cave, it was like a time machine with bones from both humans and massive extinct animals. In the Lapa do Santo cave system in Brazil, archaeologists discovered a mix of early human remains and the bones of giant ground sloths that once roamed South America. These sloths stood up to 10 feet tall and weighed over 2,000 pounds. The most disturbing part is that some bones showed tool marks, suggesting early humans may have butchered or scavenged these massive animals inside the cave. This find paints a vivid and brutal picture of ancient survival. This skeleton helped prove the missing link between modern humans and their ancient ancestors. In 1997, deep in the Middle Awash region of Ethiopia, researchers excavated the Herto-Bori cave system and found 3 nearly complete skulls dating back over 160,000 years. Known as the Herto Man, these individuals are among the oldest known Homo sapiens ever discovered. But what shocked researchers was that some skulls showed signs of cut marks, not from violence, but possibly from ritual defleshing, where the flesh was removed in a ceremonial context before burial. A very disturbing but important insight into early human customs. It looks like a collection of beads and shells, but it completely rewrote what we thought we knew about Neanderthals. Inside this coastal cave, archaeologists discovered 115,000-year-old shells with holes and pigment residues, suggesting that these were actually worn as jewelry or symbolic ornaments. This pushed back the timeline for symbolic behavior and proved Neanderthals were much more intelligent than we once thought. Some of the shells were painted with red and yellow ochre, making them some of the oldest known human-made adornments ever found. Deep inside a cold German cave, scientists found a musical instrument made from a bird's wing. In the Hohlfels cave of southwestern Germany, archaeologists uncovered something completely unexpected: a delicate flute carved from the hollow wing bone of a griffon vulture. Estimated to be over 40,000 years old, this is considered the oldest known musical instrument ever found. Even more fascinating is that the flute still works. Replicas have been made and played, revealing that early humans were capable of producing actual musical scales. This wasn't just noise, it was music made intentionally. Nearby, archaeologists also found carved ivory female figurines and tools, turning this cave into a haunting record of Paleolithic art and culture. It's as if the cave preserved the very moment humanity first found its voice. They found a finger bone in a cave and discovered an entire unknown species of ancient human. In 2010, a tiny finger bone discovered in the remote Denisova cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia turned out to be one of the biggest evolutionary shocks in recent memory. When researchers analyzed its DNA, they realized it belonged to a previously unknown species of archaic humans. Not only that, but the cave also contained tools, ornaments, and the remains of both Neanderthals and early Homo sapiens, suggesting they all lived and maybe even bred under the same roof. Later, scientists even discovered a hybrid individual in the cave, a girl whose mother was Neanderthal and father Denisovan. The cave wasn't just a home. It was literally evolutionary crossroads.
So right under one of the most tourist-heavy spots in Rome, there's a hidden city that people completely forgot about. It's called the Grottino del Campidoglio, and it's this underground maze of tunnels, cisterns, shops, taverns. It was all sealed off about 100 years ago during Mussolini's time. He basically shut it all down and built over it, probably hoping people would forget it existed, and for the most part they did. It's been locked up and gathering dust since the 1920s. Now archaeologists and city planners are finally opening it back up, and what they're finding is insane. They found Roman-era plumbing, wine cellars, even a freaking ancient bakery, and some parts go as far back as 2,000 years. It's like the Roman version of a fallout shelter. They're planning to open it to the public around 2026 or 27, but for now, it's still under restoration. Tin Shemet Cave in Israel stayed shut for about 100,000 years. 100,000. It was only just discovered recently, and what archaeologists found inside is kind of eerie. They found 5 skeletons buried in fetal positions. They'd been carefully placed there, and they were buried with red ochre and stone tools alongside them. That red powder, the ochre, was probably used for rituals. It's something ancient people used in burials to honor the dead. Everything here was pretty well preserved. Makes sense though, the cave was sealed really tight with ash and rock, keeping everything protected from the elements all that time. So it's basically a prehistoric time capsule. The bones are thought to belong to a very early group of humans, possibly from a now extinct species. Interesting, they were buried the way they were though, because it seems like these ancient people already had some idea of ritual or ceremony going on. In Jerusalem, archaeologists discovered a sealed cave that hadn't been touched for about 3,000 years. Inside was a complete pagan shrine from the Iron Age. An altar, a standing stone, burnt animal bones, and what looked like ceremonial ritual items scattered across the floor. Based on the layout and the dating, it was probably sealed up during the reign of King Hezekiah around the 8th century BCE. Hezekiah basically went on a mission to shut down all the old pagan worship. He tore down altars, he smashed idols, he closed off shrines that didn't follow the official religion. The space wasn't huge, but it was built for ceremony. The altar was a flat stone slab, stained with ash and soot, and offerings had been placed around it, most likely animal sacrifices. Tools used in rituals were found nearby as well, like carved stones and incense burners. None of it had been disturbed. People using it might have been scared they'd get in trouble or worse, so they just blocked it off and never came back. Latnija Cave helped rewrite the history of early human life on Malta. Until recently, researchers thought the first people arrived around 7,000 years ago, but this cave pushed that back by another 1,000. It had collapsed naturally and stayed sealed for about 8,500 years. When archaeologists got inside, they found animal bones, fire pits, stone tools, and the partial remains of a human skull. The tools were basic, simple flint flakes and blades, but they were sharp enough to cut meat and process hides. Burn marks on bones showed they were cooking food in there. These people were hunter-gatherers, not farmers, which means they were living on the island long before those later groups showed up, with things like farming and permanent villages. Most researchers thought Malta wasn't settled until those farming communities arrived, but this cave proves people were already here, living off wild animals and plants thousands of years earlier. But at some point, the entrance to the cave collapsed, sealing it off and keeping everything inside preserved for thousands of years. The Garma Cave in northern Spain was sealed off by a rockfall about 17,000 years ago. Because of that, it's one of the best preserved Ice Age sites ever found. When archaeologists finally got inside, they found human footprints still pressed into the floor, as if someone had just walked through and left. The cave walls were covered in paintings. There were animals, more abstract shapes, handprints, and scattered across the floor were stone tools, bone needles, pendants, and butchered animal bones. They also found what looked like a bed made from branches and animal skins, tucked into a corner. One section of the cave had bones set up in patterns, like it was some kind of ritual or offering or something. Either that or someone was just bored. They also found torches left behind by whoever used this place last. The cave wasn't rediscovered until 1995, and it's still not open to the public because researchers just don't want to mess with the conditions inside. Fair enough. Sheridan Cave sits in northwest Ohio, and it was completely sealed off at the end of the last ice age, about 11,000 years ago. A sheet of glacial mud blocked the entrance, which basically turned the cave into a storage locker, except prehistoric. Archaeologists found some pretty incredible stuff in here. Spear points and butchered animal bones from creatures that don't even exist anymore. Things like giant beavers and an ancient wild boar type animal called a flat-headed pecaries. I've never heard of anything like that before. Some of the bones still had cut marks on them. There were even pieces of leather and wood which almost never survived that long. The tools belonged to a group of early Americans known as the late Paleo-Indians. This cave gives one of the clearest looks at how they lived. There were remnants of fire pits. The floors had layers of ash, bone, and charcoal built up over time. But once the entrance sealed, that was it. No more moisture, no more animals, no more people. So everything just froze in place. Most prehistoric sites in North America have been picked over or damaged by weather, but this one stayed just as it was left for thousands of years.
Stat number 10, the Texas blind salamander. 3 red flags, right in the name alone. Texas, blind, and salamander. They say everything is bigger in Texas. Please don't let that be true for this creepy crawly, please. Unless you live around the Edwards Plateau in Texas, you don't have to worry about these guys while you're spelunking. The Texas blind salamander can only be found in the deep cave systems, and you'll know when you see it. It kind of looks like one of Khaleesi's dragons from Game of Thrones. It's got red gills on the back of their pale heads, and like many others on this list, it is adapted completely to the dark. These salamanders lost their vision, but it's totally fine. It's chill. They don't need eyes. They move their head around slowly and they sense changes in water pressure. That's just the start too. How horrible. Let's do it. Number 9. Blind cavefish. So a lot of these creatures, if not all of them, they're blind. Spoiler alert, that's the fun beauty of this list. All of these creatures live in pure darkness their entire lives, so they need to find other ways to hunt. Some of them sense water pressure changes, but when it comes to the Mexican tetra, aka the blind cavefish, they don't even need eyes at all. Not even for show. Awesome. This is horrifying. They were discovered originally in 1936 in Sierra de El Abra, Mexico. If you thought your high school had clicks, you're not ready for the blind cavefish. Since they don't have eyes at all, cavefish rely purely on sonar clicks in order to stay in their respective schools. Yeah, not a bad click pun there, right? You guys are like, wait, why was he? Oh, I get it. Some of these fish will eventually see light, and that's not bizarre, but when that happens, they slowly develop eyes and vision. How insane is that? That's only if they're near surface rivers. Imagine just growing eyes and then seeing light. What a Wednesday that ought to be. Number 8. The olm. Okay, I'll give you one more before we get into the gross spiders. The olm, our number 8 today is, dare I say it, he's a little cute. He's kind of cute. I want to rub his little head. I don't know how laws work here at all. I just see a fish and I'm like, I hope it's not National Geographic, if that helps. I mean, the lack of eyes here is a little jarring, sure, but the olm compared to the rest of this list, it's a breath of fresh air. The olm was the first ever troglobite to be discovered, meaning the first ever creature that lives purely in a dark cave. And given the fact that it's pale, eyeless, and it looks like a dragon, Croatia folk back in the 18th century, they thought that they were looking at a literal dragon for a hot minute. Yeah, more than fair, more than fair. I have unlimited resources online right now, and even so, 30% of me thinks that's a dragon, for sure. It can probably breathe fire, right? If you see this little guy, don't try and slay it. Leave it alone. Water pollution has made the olm a vulnerable species. We just did a list on extinct animals we're trying to bring back to life. Let's also preserve the blind dragons while we're at it, okay? Cheers. Hit that thumbs up for blind amphibians. Number 7, the cave robber spider. I warned you, I did warn you. You wanted it, here it is. The worst thing ever. Welcome to Most Amazing. That's why we're here. That's why I'm here, rather. The cave robber spider, or trogloraptor, can't tell which is worse there, oh my gosh, is a quick little cave predator that has a fun addition over your standard spider. Yeah, the cave robber has claws on the end of its legs. Yeah, you thought it couldn't get any worse, did you? Well, wrong. Here we go. The cave robber spider likes to hang from its web from, atop these pitch black caves. Then when it feels something a little too close for comfort passing down below, it snaps. It snaps its prey with claws, like a praying mantis, only in dark caves, and also a spider. I'm gonna be sick. This is horrible. If you live in Southwest Oregon, I am so sorry. Please do not explore any caves. Just stay home. Stay home, play Nintendo. That's it. Number 6, kawaii cave spider. Hungry for more cave spiders, are we? No sweat, let's do it. This one does not have eyes. Sans eyes, no eyes. Somehow worse than the last one, right? First discovered in 1971 in, you guessed it, Kauai Island, Hawaii. One of our fans, Alan Bennington Castro, this one's for you, living in Hawaii. Yeah, how's the sun? How's the tan? This is what you get for living in paradise. It's referred to as the blind wolf spider, and if your palms are also sweating right now, they're one of the most rare creatures in the world, okay? So only 30 have ever been documented. More than fair. What's that? 31? Oh. One's missing, that's odd. I think researchers are finding more out in public. They're just not down to take photos or get close. That's what I believe in, really. Forget that, I would quit in that cave if I saw one of these. Since it's lived in darkness its entire life, it doesn't have eyes. There's no need for them. That's so scary, that's horrible to look at. The spider is considered endangered. That's all thanks to humans splunking and bringing toxic chemicals like nicotine around. Plus we also attract non-native predators every time we leave food in these cave expeditions. So good on us. These spiders are great hunters, but they're not that great. We gotta stop, leave the caves alone.
At number 5, we have the Bosnian caveman. All I know about Bosnia is that meme about Croatia not letting them use the beach at all or ever want to go for a swim. That meme is absolutely amazing. It's so good, it was all over the internet. Also, I had a buddy when I was in high school who was from Bosnia who introduced me to putting salt on tomatoes and just eating it, which is bomb AF. It's so good. But I also know this guy now. He decided that he didn't want to live in the city and moved into the caves in the mountains. He built his own little hut and then just moved right in. The only problem is the winters are brutal. Let's have a look at his situation. This guy is a trooper.
He's been living in an empty cave he found years ago in Bosnia. He says he was evicted from his home back in 2007 when he lost his job. Since then, he's made this his abode.
He's got a cane, but he doesn't let it slow him down for a second. He has all his blankets and everything ready to go. I will say that this is very dangerous living for a man of his age. If he gets hurt, there will be no life alert in the mountains to come get him. No one will come up to find him. He will just be stuck up there and probably freeze to death. But he is committed to his lifestyle, and I mean, everyone else is eventually going to die too, so might as well do it doing something you love, even if that means living in a cave by yourself. At number 4, we have the Veda of Sri Lanka. Some people don't want to join the world of self-driving cars and social media, and I don't really blame them. All these things just really make things more complicated. And there are the Veda who live in the forest of Galoya. They have chosen a life that takes them back to the roots. They live in a community that hunts for their own food and will make work of whatever the earth provides for them. When it comes to housing, they have broken it into 2 sectors. Some people build their own homes out of mud and stones, huts that protect them from the elements and wandering predators. Other members get to live in the intricate cave systems. You usually don't get this opportunity until you're an older member of the tribe. The caves are fancy living, so what this tells me is that it doesn't matter how far back in time you go, there will always be a system of hierarchy. Even people hunting and living in mud huts have older people living in nicer places than them. The boomer culture vibrates through everything. At number 3, we have the Orphans of Bucharest. This is a wild story. Back in 1989, there was a new government that took power in Romania. One of their orders of business was to go around and shut down orphanages, which sounds absolutely villainous. I don't know the whole backstory on this, but on paper it looks really bad. You know, those kids don't have any homes and they live in government housing to survive. So let's take that away, the one thing that they have. Well, of course they had nowhere to go. They're orphans, so they decided they would make a community and they all went down into the sewers to hide. And that ended up being their new home. Since then, there have been people living down there all the time, and they continue to call this place their home. It's not a good situation. Most of them don't have anywhere to sleep or any clean clothes to wear. They get all their food from the trash, and it should be no surprise that most of the people living down there are addicted to drugs. Even some of them are born down there and only know a life of living down in the sewers. At number 2, we have the Paris catacombs. If you've watched this channel for long enough, then you know there is a massive series of tunnels under Paris and have millions of bodies worth of remains tucked away down there. There are sections that are littered with skulls and other bones that give off an extremely gothic feel. But what else could be going on down there? There was one summer when the Paris police force went down to explore the tunnels. They came across a full movie theater and a full setup that make it look like dozens of people were hanging out down there. This was so strange, and it begged the question of where they were getting the power from. What electricity was running this whole setup? Then the officers left to contact the power officials to find out where they were siphoning the energy from. They returned with the whole squad, and the whole setup had been disassembled. There was no trace of who had previously been there. The only thing left was a note that read, "Do not try to find us," which is kind of terrifying. Some creepy people living in the catacombs. And for our number 1 spot, we have Miyamoto Musashi. This might be the greatest sword fighter who has ever lived. He is one of the most famous people in all of Japan, and his story has been transported into books, television, movies, and I wouldn't be surprised if he had made it into a few video games as well. For those of you who don't know, Miyamoto Musashi was a samurai who lived from 1584 to 1645. He mastered the techniques of fighting with 2 swords and would travel through the land looking for opponents. People who were master samurais or people who had mastered other weaponry. He would challenge them to a duel to the death. In 61 fights, he was never beaten. This guy went 61-0 in life or death battles. Beyond his mastery of the sword, he also wrote the Book of 5 Rings, which is studied by some of the most successful people in the world today. The book highlights the concept of strategy, how this is the one skill that Musashi learned, and through that skill he was able to learn all other skills. He wrote this book in the later stages of his life when he was dying from cancer. Most of this time he spent living in a cave. He used it to seclude himself and focus on his meditation. The cave has been named Rigonado, or Spirit Rock Cave. It is now considered a sacred place, since this guy was one of the most deadly warriors who ever lived.
Starting off this list with Kenny Veach. Kenny Veach was an experienced hiker and explorer who went missing in 2014 while searching for a peculiar cave in the Nevada desert. Kenny shared in a YouTube comment that he had encountered a mysterious M-shaped cave near the Nellis Air Force Base around Area 51, which had apparently caused his body to vibrate. Encouraged by other commenters, he filmed his exploration of the cave and uploaded it to his YouTube channel, Snakebite McGee, titling it M Cave Hike. Unfortunately though, on his third attempt to reach the cave, a few months later, he vanished without a trace. His cell phone was discovered near the entrance of an old mine shaft, yet his whereabouts are still unknown. It's possible he got lost or had an accident, but the cave's proximity to Area 51 and Kenny's claims of odd vibrations led to a lot of online rumors and theories. Some speculated he might have stumbled upon significant information related to extraterrestrials or government secrets, and that his pursuit was intentionally disrupted. Despite extensive searches though, there's still no solid evidence or leads as to where he is. Next we have Ben McDaniel. Ben McDaniel disappeared in August of 2010 while exploring Vortex Spring in Florida. He dove down to explore an underwater cave roughly 58 feet below the surface. He resurfaced. It was totally fine. He refilled his tanks in preparation for a second dive later in the evening, but this time he never returned. His truck was left behind at a dive shop. Inside it were his wallet, a cell phone, and a map of the cave. There were also 2 oxygen tanks found near the entrance of the cave, and the 2 divers who discovered them found it odd that there was just air in the tanks rather than having a mix of gas, which is typically the case when deep diving. The cave is known for being tricky to navigate with tight spaces and poor visibility, and despite a thorough search by experienced divers, he was never found. Some think he might have run into problems, maybe he got stuck or had issues with his gear, but no one knows for sure. And some even suggest he purposely disappeared or maybe faked his own vanishing, which is quite the reach, but there's still no concrete answers till this day. Next on the list is Michael Leland Vincent. Vincent went missing in Mammoth Cave National Park in Kentucky on May 5th, 2011. At the time, he was on parole and he had just set fire to his house, which he shared with his mother and aunt. Some speculated that he had attempted to burn down his house in order to fake his own death so that he could escape the consequences of his charges. Some say he may have taken his own life, but no body has ever been discovered. He lived very close to Mammoth Cave though, which is huge. In fact, it's the largest known cave system in the world. So if he did go missing in that cave, it's likely he'll never be found. Next we have Peter Verhulsel. Peter was exploring the Sterkfontein caves in South Africa with some friends in 1984. He had veered off the line strung through the cave, which was used to help them find their way back out. Scuba divers were sent in to try and locate him, but days, then weeks went by before his body was finally discovered, at which point it was too late. Peter was unable to find his way back to his friends, but had managed to find a small underground beach where he pulled himself out of the water. It was pitch black in there, and his oxygen tank was just about depleted, so he was completely trapped. In this multi-week long search, rescue teams would have been within 36 meters of him, but Peter didn't hear them, and the rescuers believed that he had drowned. When Peter was finally found 6 weeks after having gone missing, it was determined that he had died of starvation. Floyd Collins. Floyd Collins met his unfortunate fate in Crystal Cave in Kentucky, a cave which he had actually discovered and had been mapping out and exploring for 8 whole years. On January 30th, 1925, while exploring the cave, Collins became trapped in a narrow passage about 150 feet away from the entrance. He had been working on creating an entrance to a grotto he had discovered down there when his gas lamp started to dim. Now, he was in a rush to make his way back out of the cave, and he accidentally knocked over his lamp, igniting it completely, or opposite of igniting it, he put it out completely, and his foot landed on an unstable part of the wall. Rocks started to shift, and one of them fell from the ceiling, pinning his leg. A rescue effort was, of course, launched, but Floyd was deep in the cave, and the difficult conditions made a rescue kind of tough to execute. Despite the attempts of rescuers, Collins remained trapped for over 2 weeks. Tragically, On February 13th, Collins finally died of exposure, hunger, possibly hypothermia. This was most likely the day he died, but his body wasn't actually retrieved until the 16th.
At number 10, we have the Manhattan Tunnel people. New York is one of the most expensive places to live, and real estate has become a commodity that many people are struggling to afford. So when rent is too high and you have nowhere to run, you only have a few options left. Some people will turn to homeless shelters, but these environments can be very dangerous and often struggle to keep the cleanliness to a level that people find livable. When social services aren't up to par, people don't feel that they have anywhere to go. Some people turn to a life of living in underground tunnels. They legitimately find it safer and cleaner than the shelters, but the biggest problem down there is drugs. Most people who have made the move to the tunnels are addicted to some sort of substance. Every now and again, the New York police will perform raids on these tunnels to push everyone out, but it really just moves the problem to another section of the tunnels. At number 9, we have the Shanxi cave people. In the province of Shanxi, China, some people have opted out of living in a traditional home and have decided to dig out their own house. The rock bed in the side of the mountain surrounding the area is softer than usual, and with just a shovel you will be able to dig out a large home area and call it your nice new house. Do you think you would be pissed off by the guy who decided to dig like just right above you and then stays up all night listening to terrible music? Like, dude, you could have dug anywhere. The cave is huge. Why are you right here? The caves are called the Yaodong, and for the most part they are simple, but some people have put in some serious elbow grease to turn them into multi-room homes. If you got a shovel and a good back, there is really no limit to how big you can make your place. People have chosen to make this move because it is easier and more affordable than living in the city. At number 8, we have the boys from Camp Shur in the Philippines. When your town gets hit by a natural disaster, it can be devastating, and you hope that you can eventually recover and get back on your feet, but for some people those moments never come. In the Philippines, there were two boys who lost everything in a typhoon. It destroyed their home, and because of this they were forced to live in a cave. It was Jason and Juan Garania who were forced to live inside a cave so they could survive. This is really one of the scariest situations that could happen to these two brothers. On the bright side, they still have each other and they're still going to school. The community is raising funds to try and find them a place to live. At number 7, we have the Well Lady. Now, what is a well but just a vertical cave? It's basically the same thing, am I right? For sure I'm right, because I'm the one making the video. There was a lady in China who wanted to live in the city but couldn't afford the ridiculous rent prices. This sounds like every single person living in New York and LA. She found a hole in the ground, set it up like a bedroom, and then called it home. Her name is Quan Yushi, and she is sort of an innovator. I think it's only a matter of time before people in other expensive cities start doing the exact same thing. I mean, is it any worse than living in a windowless basement? At least she doesn't have any roommates. The well that she lives in is not in use, so she's not taking a water supply away from anyone. Her biggest risk is of course flooding. If the city started flooding, her room would fill up with water, which would obviously be very dangerous. This could lead to her drowning. But if you want to live in a city, you gotta be a hustler and you gotta take big risks to get big rewards. At number 6, we have Syrian shelter. Syria has been at war with surrounding countries for years. For the people who no longer wanted to deal with the constant threat of death, there was a few options left. Leave the country or go live in caves underground. There's a whole community of people who decided to use the shelter of the earth to protect them from the travesties of war. They had no option. They didn't want to die and they couldn't afford to leave. Many of these people have families who care about them. Leaving them behind is not an option.
Moving into number 4, let's talk about the Caves of Death in Scotland. Judging by the name, it says it all. Well, you wouldn't catch me going anywhere near this place, but for people who are brave enough to go on a death expedition, I mean a cave exploration, these remote caves can be found in northern Scotland. But be warned, archaeologists who already have explored these caves, well, they have found some pretty horrifying things. Human sacrifices used to be conducted there, and there are even children's heads posted on poles. There are thousands of dead bodies inside, and people believe that this cave could have been used for some pretty intense supernatural rituals. Like I said before, I'm staying away from all the caves on this list, especially this one. The Moaning Cavern is up next at number 3. This dark cave got its name, well, because you can hear a creepy moaning sound coming from inside of the cavern. This happens because the soul of the dead are screaming out in agonizing pain. Okay, not really, but the moans are from when the air circulates deep within the cave. But the sound is still pretty unsettling. If a scary moaning doesn't keep you away, maybe this will. Well, there are over 100 prehistoric bodies lurking at the bottom of the cave, and no one knows what they're doing there. Once you rappel 165 feet into the cave, you will have to exit through an iron staircase, and you're gonna want to watch your step because it's a long way down if you fall. Killing Cave takes our number 2 spot on this list. Okay, who the heck are naming these caves? Killing Cave? Well, if you ever visit Cambodia, you can go visit the Killing Caves for yourself for some reason. Well, not that you would really want to. I mean, is this really a big tourist attraction? Well, it might be because in the 70s, these caves used to be a place to torture and murder people, so there is history behind it. Well, the bones of the victims can still be found inside. Some of the skeletons have been crammed into display cases, and there are chicken wire cages that are filled up high with human skulls. Torture devices and victims' clothing are still scattered along the floor, and many other people were murdered there when they were pushed into the cave from the skylight above. So I'm thinking that a place with this much dark history can't be good for the soul. There's definitely an evil presence there, and it's also a pretty morbid place if you ask me. And just like that, topping our list, and at number 1, we have the Bell Witch Cave. This property and cave was once owned by John Bell, and it's believed that the Bell Witch torments the Bell family until they mysteriously died. The family used to see strange animals around their property, and late at night, they would hear strange noises such as gnawing, choking, and dragging sounds. Violent attacks by unknown forces started happening to the family. The youngest daughter would wake up covered in scratches, and she'd be covered in bruises as well. Apparently the Bell Witch lived inside of the caves, and anyone who stepped foot on the property will be paid a nasty visit by her. And at number 10, we have the Devil's Hole. I mean, the name speaks for itself. It's as easy to stay away from a cave with a name like this. This place has a distinction of being known as the most haunted place in western New York, and it's for a good reason. According to the native folklore, the Iroquois said that a demonic serpent named Evil One lived inside of the cave. People who would go inside of it will either never come out again, or they will come out with their hair turned white. But things get worse as we go back in time to the Devil's Hole Massacre of 1763. A group of warriors used the Devil's Hole to attack soldiers. It was a complete bloodbath, and 81 British soldiers were killed and their bodies were thrown into the cave to rot and decompose. The Hellfire Caves takes us to number 9. So if you're not into claustrophobia, labyrinths, or dangerous places, then you're gonna want to stay far away from the Hellfire Caves. A team of paranormal investigators traveled through the long, winding tunnels in an attempt to conjure up spirits. This cave is home to catacombs that lie about 300 feet below the surface. The old Hellfire Club used to hold meetings that consist of pagan worship and human sacrifices. Supposedly there are a ton of evil ghosts that linger within these caves, but if that doesn't scare you, it's for sure scaring me. Maybe a half a mile of tunnels underground will do the trick, because you never know, maybe you'll get lost and you'll never see the surface ever again. Gomantong Cave in Malaysia brings us to number 8. This next cave seems like it came straight out of a horror movie. The Gomantong Cave is the home to millions of bats, and if that doesn't freak you out, maybe the millions of cockroaches that feast on anything alive will do the trick. Animals that accidentally fall into this scary cave will be quickly devoured by these cockroaches. Okay, and then we have the cherry on top. This place also has enormous cockroach-eating centipedes that scurry along the cave walls. So don't ever go inside of this cave without wearing one of those sealed up bodysuits, or better yet, don't ever venture inside of it at all. Number 7 takes us to Noval Cave in Romania. This place is also known as the Poison Caves because it is rich in hydrogen sulfide and carbon dioxide but low in oxygen. But despite this, creatures are living in the cave and they have been separated from the outside world for the past 5.5 million years. Inside of this dark cave, there are spiders, scorpions, wood lice, and centipedes crawling along the walls, and many of them haven't even been seen by humans. So who knows what else is lurking inside the shadows? The Cave of Sybil descends onto our list at number 6. There are some pretty creepy natural formations around the world where people think that these are entrances or even gateways into hell. One of the oldest known entrances to the underworld is this cave right here. Apparently it is so sinister and fueled by negative energy that birds won't even fly over it. They know better. According to the legend, the dead priestess Sybil guards this gateway and lures travelers into the fiery pit of hell. Well, you know what? I'm not willing to see if this legend is true or not, so you know what? I'm just gonna keep my distance away from this one. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky takes our number 5 spot. So this is the largest haunted cave in America. So yeah, you're gonna want to keep your distance from this place, and that's because it has a very dark past. There are over 150 documented paranormal events that have happened here, so that's why people are so fascinated with the cave's supernatural history. But in 1842, the cave was used to house patients that were infected with tuberculosis. Honestly, this sounds like such a morbid and gloomy place to try to recover from a deadly disease. All of the patients got worse, and they eventually died within the cave. Some say that if you listen closely, you can actually still hear coughing inside, because it's believed that the patients still haunt this cave even to this day.
Number 5, the rat snake. Not to be confused with the rattlesnake, that's another horror entirely. The rat snake is found over North and Central America. And it pains me to say this, but they're kind of common. Yeah, there's one type of rat snake though, and this has made its home in the Mexican jungles. And locals refer to this cave as the Cave of Hanging Snakes. Why would you even go in? If someone's, oh, what's it called? No problem, not going in. This cave is chock full of bats, so these snakes are talking to one another. They made a little snake heist, a little snake plan, and they decided to hang out in the walls and the ceiling and wait for all these bats to leave the cave or come back in. Yeah, how horrible is that? They dangle by their tails and grab a bat mid-flight. Yeah, I didn't like snakes before this list. Then I saw this. Number 4, Priaticthus andrewsi. This species of cyprinid fish, okay, of course it lives in complete darkness, not new, but the wow factor here with this cave fish is that they have evolved to live in complete darkness for over 2 million years. They've been without eyes for a while, unlike the other fish that I mentioned earlier. They can only be found in Somalia, and it's the first ever animal in history that does not adjust its biological clock with the sun. How cool is that? Its days are around 47 hours long. A fish that can naturally process time and numbers without the sun. That's the coolest thing on our list today. I think that's definitely the coolest. Number 3, cave crayfish. And we're back to creepy crawlies. I gave you a break there with the fish again, but sadly, there's more happening on the ceilings of these dark caves. Ugh. I'm Canadian, so I've seen crayfish in lakes and all that. Already, not a fan. Now we got cave crayfish? Come on, man. The thing with these troglobites is that they have a small amount of food their entire lives. They live in areas without the sun. That's a huge lack of nutrition. That's why they're all so pale. That's why they all look like me in February. Very pale. In turn, this crayfish is quite slow. We love that. Why rush, you know? Take it slow. Chill out, man. In fact, some of these cave crayfish have lived to be 175. Again, they like to take it real slow. Number 2, cave harvestman. Okay, yeah, don't let the looks fool you. This creepy cave dweller is not a spider. It's an Apilion. It's a completely different arachnid. It's actually cousins to daddy longlegs. Why do we call this one daddy cave legs? I don't know. Like commit or don't, you know, but daddy thing's weird with bugs. They're one of the most common when it comes to these dark cave creatures. They're so common that some residents in the States have actually tried and went to court. Yeah, hear this out. The bone cave harvestman only lives in Central Texas, and back in 2014, a nonprofit group filed a petition to have it delisted. So imagine putting on a dress shirt and going to court. Like, oh, did you have jury duty? No, I actually went to go fight the existence of a spider. Sorry, a non-spider. Number 1, Cynocolipus. Yeah, we had to save the one that sounds like a Decepticon for last. That's only fair. The Cynocolipus, or Cynocolipus if you're fancy, is one of the coolest creatures I've ever seen. It looks like a shrimp with the head of a much larger ant. Take that back. Instead of cool, scary. It's a very scary creature. It's a cave-dwelling millipede. Here you go, folks. Nightmares for number 1. There you go. Out of the 6 known species, 5 of them are often found hiding in limestone caves in Southeast Asia, and they come in many shapes and sizes. But since they live in complete darkness, their legs are even longer than your average millipede, and it's pale, so you won't see it coming, really. Its antenna is also quite long too, so if you feel a little itch on the back of your neck, could be this guy right here. The only good news here is that their eyesight isn't all that dandy, right? But after everything I just said, does that really make a difference, do you think? No, it doesn't.
At number 5, we have Tunnel Man. When you have nowhere to go, sometimes the best option is just to dig a tunnel in the ground and hope for the best. Sean Heron fell on some hard times while living in Clovis, New Mexico, and had nobody to turn to. And when that happens, you have to take the situation into your own hands, so he dug a tunnel underground and he started living in a cave behind a baseball diamond. It was completely hidden until one person saw him going in and out and decided to post a video tour on Facebook while Sean wasn't there. And to be honest, for a cave, it wasn't that bad. He had a closet, some drawers that he dug out of the walls, and a bed. Some people were worried that he might be violent, but most people see it's just a man who decided to live in a cave. Also, the city can't do anything about it because he dug his new home on private property, so it's up to the landowners to kick him off. He was arrested once for trespassing but was quickly released and then went right back to living in his little hole. I bet he's just praying that it never rains. At number 4, we have the Silent Cave Baba. Throughout the jungles of India, there are people who've chosen a monk-like life and live in caves away from society. YouTuber Dakota of Earth was looking to find one of these men. He was known as the Silent Baba. Dakota ventured throughout the jungle looking for the orange cloth. It said that the entrance of his cave home was marked by an orange cloth and that his home was located under a waterfall. Just talking about this, it sounds like some sort of quest in a video game. Once he found this wise man in the cave, he did live up to his name. The man didn't speak a word. He communicated with some self-made sign language. Once he was there, the two sat down and enjoyed a couple of handmade rolled cigarettes. The whole experience seems somewhat mystical. When Dakota came to visit him, he gave him a shawl and a few bananas. It might be gifts like this that ensure the Cave Baba's survival, or he might have an unknown survival technique that we will never know because the Cave Baba has taken a vow of silence. At number 3, we have Lost. Now the next one isn't about someone living in a cave, but it's a terrifying story, so I wanted to keep it on this list. YouTuber Exploring with Josh was doing a trip into the ape cave at Mount St. Helens. The exploration was going pretty normal, a few jokes here and there, and the whole place is pretty beautiful. But then in a tucked away spot deep in the cave, they literally had to squeeze themselves in there to get into this section. They find a little girl, probably only 8 years old, all by herself. She has no flashlight, she didn't speak English, and she was very afraid and crying. For a moment, a wave of shock hits the whole crew, and everyone has no idea what to do. They just found a crying kid in a cave, and this obviously isn't an everyday occurrence. But luckily they found her parents and everyone was reunited. But could you imagine what that would be like for you as a kid? You're in a foreign country, you don't speak the language, and you're lost in a cave. I would be crying like a baby. At number 2, we have The Fugitive. In China back in 2002, a man escaped a work camp. His name was Song Jiang, and he was arrested and tried for the crime of human trafficking. Officials tried to track him down for years, but they were unable to find him. After almost 2 decades of searching, he was nowhere to be found. It seemed that he had either fled the country or maybe he took his own life out of fear of the government. Turns out it was none of these. For this entire time, Jiang had been hiding and living in caves. Cops received some information from someone living in the area that Jiang was living up in a cave system in a secluded area. They sent in a team of drones to see if they could find him. They found a cave opening covered in blankets and tools, then sent in a team to see if this was his hideout, and sure enough, it was. You think if he spent years working in human trafficking, he would be able to sneak himself out of the country. Also, I don't know what is worse, a life living in caves or a life in prison, but I don't know, I guess he got both, so you would have to ask him. And for our number 1 spot, we have the Iceman. This video was taken by some tourists going on a regular cave tour. While filming, they spotted this.
Someone climbing up the wall. It's an Iceman. It's a ghost. Jesus, what is that?
Like any good supernatural video, it's pretty hard to make out what we are looking at, but it does look like some sort of man with light blue skin scaling the wall. Could it be some sort of cave animal that we haven't discovered yet? Or is this a man who has somehow managed to live in an ice cave and learned how to climb sheer rock walls? It's definitely unsettling and you can hear everyone react in awe, but I guess we're gonna have to let this one stay a mystery.
Next up is the Nam Talu Cave incident. In 2007, Helena Carroll and her fiance John Cullen were exploring Nam Talu Cave in Thailand along with 7 other tourists. Things took a turn for the worse though, when a flash flood broke out. This giant wave gushed into the cave and swept away everyone except for Helena and John, who just started climbing in order to escape this rising water. They reached a ledge and debated what they were going to do next. John ultimately decided he was going to attempt to swim to safety and send back help. He did not survive survive, and Carol was found and rescued hours later. She was the only survivor. Number 4, we have what I like to call a close call. This was a story posted to Reddit by a now deleted user, but the story goes that they were exploring a cave with their family. As they were making their way out, they discovered a narrow opening in the rock, about knee-high. By lying on their stomachs and squeezing through the tight space, they entered a small crawl space within the rock. The ceiling of this space was adorned with beautiful quartz crystals. Moving in one by one, the group stared up at this beautiful sight before them. The space was so tight, though, that they could feel the ceiling against their backs and the floor against their stomachs with each breath. They continued deeper though until the path led to an area covered in sediment formations like stalagmites and stalactites. Everyone thought this was pretty cool, but they began to feel water trickling onto their backs. They realized that it was raining outside, and the crawl space had a downward slope that would quickly fill with rainwater. The only way to escape was the way back they'd come in, and what started as a small trickle of water pretty quickly grew into streams, and the water began to accumulate. They rushed to exit, crawling out one by one, but the water was flooding in faster than they could escape, and the user who was furthest from the exit was trying very hard not to panic. They had the worst time here, crawling on their stomach with sharp crystals hanging from the ceiling again, and they struggled to keep up. The water level rose rapidly, splashing against them as they crawled, and just in time though, they managed to crawl out as the water had reached their lips at this point, and everyone managed to get out safely. Ugh, I feel uncomfortable just reading that. Number 3, we have the catacombs video. Now, while the Paris catacombs isn't technically a cave, it is cavernous and dark and incredibly easy to get lost in. This is one of the most infamous pieces of found footage on the internet, as we still don't know who this person was. If you somehow have not heard about this case before, it's a POV video of a person exploring the catacombs. The camera with the footage was found later on by a group of explorers. Most of the video is pretty mundane until you start to notice that the person behind the camera seems to be getting increasingly more distressed. He starts to pick up his pace, pointing the camera around in a frantic manner as if realizing he's lost and is starting to panic. Then he's in a full-on run. The video ends with the cameraman finally dropping the camera and just running deeper into the shadowy depths of the maze of catacombs as the camera continues to film before finally running out of battery. John Edward Jones. In 2009, John Edward Jones went missing in Nutty Putty Cave, Utah. John was exploring the cave with his brother when he got stuck upside down in an uncharted narrow passage which he had mistaken for a section called the Birth Canal Passageway. Despite efforts to free him, John remained trapped in the tight space. Rescuers worked tirelessly to try and retrieve him, but in the end, they were unable to save his life. The challenging conditions of the cave made it extremely difficult. The passage was only about 10 inches wide in some places, and it was positioned at a steep angle. The rescue operation involved pulleys, ropes, and other equipment to try and free John. They even brought in specialized teams from around the country to help, but unfortunately, after nearly 28 hours of being trapped in this upside-down compressed position, John suffered cardiac arrest. Because of the dangerous conditions and the risk to the rescuers, it was decided the best course of action was to just close off the entrance to the cave, sealing it with concrete to prevent further access. And finally, we have the rescue. I thought I'd finish off the video with an uplifting story for once. Let's leave things on a good note. Uploaded in 2016 to the YouTube channel Exploring with Josh, the group of friends were exploring Ape Cave in Mount St. Helens, Oregon, when they made a pretty shocking discovery. At the start of the trek, the cave is very spacious, but pretty soon the group were on their hands and knees as they had moved further and further into the cave. It was becoming increasingly more low and narrow, and one of the guys suggested they just turn back, saying, "I don't think this is worth it, man. I don't think we're meant to crawl this far," but they continued on, and it's lucky that they did, because they came across a young girl who had got lost in the cave somehow. She didn't have anything on her, no light, nothing, but she'd managed to crawl in that far. The boys were able to bring her back to safety, where she was reunited with her parents. Luckily, she hadn't been in there very long. If they hadn't decided to explore the cave that day, who knows if she ever would have been found.